All right, let's jump right in. We're about to pull back the curtain on all these invisible forces that are, constantly shaping our lives every single day. We're talking about the unwritten rules that tell us how to act, what's cool to wear, and even how to eat our food. So, quick question for you. Have you ever eaten a big plate of spaghetti with just your hands at a nice restaurant? Yeah, probably not. But why? I mean, it's not illegal, there's no law against it, but you just know you shouldn't do it. That little feeling right there, that invisible rule, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. So to get started, we really need to understand what I like to call society's unwritten rule book. This is what helps us figure out that really important difference between stuff that's just kind of weird, stuff that's considered genuinely wrong, and the things that'll actually get you in trouble with the law. Okay, so at the very heart of all this is a concept called social control. The best way to think about it is like it's society's operating system. It's this whole collection of rules, both big and small, that are all designed to keep things running smoothly. We're talking everything from a school's dress code to your parents grounding you for staying out too late. It's this constant, kind of subtle pressure to just fit in. Now, what happens when you push back against that pressure? Well, that's where you get deviance. And this is basically any behavior that breaks those unwritten social rules, what sociologists call norms. And look, we're not talking about huge crimes here. It's more like wearing a full-on Halloween costume in the middle of May. No one's going to arrest you for sure, but you are absolutely going to get some strange looks. Crime, on the other hand, is a very specific type of deviance. This is when you cross the line and break the formal, written-down laws of the land, things like theft or robbery. This is the stuff that comes with official, government-sanctioned punishments, not just some side-eye from strangers on the street. So, let's break it down really simply. Here's the most important distinction. All crime is a form of deviance, but not all deviance is a crime. Forgetting to use your turn signal, that's deviant. It breaks a social driving rule. And yeah, it might get you some angry honks, but stealing the car itself? Now that's a crime. You see the difference? One breaks an unwritten rule, the other breaks an actual law. Okay, so if society sets up all these goals for us, get a great job, be successful, make a lot of money, how do we respond to that pressure? Well, a sociologist named Robert Merton came up with a really cool idea. He said we basically have 5 different strategies for playing this game of life. And this chart really lays it all out. Most of us choose conformity. We accept society's goals like getting wealthy, and we accept the usual way to get there, like studying and working hard. But what if that path doesn't work for you? Well, innovators want the same goal, but they find a new and often illegal way to get it. Then you've got ritualists. They've kind of given up on the big goal, but they just keep plodding along, going through the motions. Think of a teacher who just doesn't care anymore. Retreatists, they reject the goals and the means. They just check out completely. And finally, you have the rebels, who throw out the whole system and try to build something new. Kind of makes you think, right? Which path are you on? So this all leads to a really big question. Why do people break the rules in the first place? Is it something we're born with? Are some of us just natural-born rebels? Or is it something we actually pick up along the way? Let's dig into a few of the big theories. First up is something called social bond theory. And the core idea here is actually pretty simple. Your connections to society, your bonds, they act like a kind of leash, keeping you from wandering too far off the path. The stronger your connections to your family, your friends, your school, your community, the less likely you are to break the rules. To put it another way, the more you have to lose, the better you're probably going to behave. Then there's differential association theory. This one basically suggests that deviance is contagious. It's not something you're born with, it's something you learn from the people you spend the most time with. If your friends all think it's no big deal to cheat on a test, the chances that you'll start to feel the same way go way, way up. It's that old saying, right? You become who you hang out with. But, maybe the most fascinating and kind of mind-bending theory of them all is labeling theory. It makes this wild argument that no act is naturally deviant on its own. It's all about how people react to it. It's not about what you do. It's what society calls it. An action only becomes deviant when some group with power decides to slap that label on it. Think about it. Skipping class might be seen as a bad kid thing for one student, but for another, it's just what they do. The action's the same, but the label changes everything. And this whole idea of labeling has some really powerful consequences. I mean, once someone gets tagged with a deviant label, like troublemaker or slacker, it can be incredibly hard to shake off. That label can actually become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it can fundamentally change who that person becomes. And that's the difference between what's called primary and secondary deviance. See, primary deviance is just the initial act. Maybe you're late to class one time. It's not a big deal. It doesn't define you. But if you get labeled as the kid who's always late, you might start to believe it. That's secondary deviance. It's when you accept that label, you internalize it, and it becomes a real part of your identity. You start acting like the troublemaker everyone says you are. And when that negative label is especially powerful, we call it a stigma. A stigma is way more than just a nickname. It's a really deep mark of disgrace that can completely change how society sees you and maybe even more importantly, how you see yourself. It becomes what's called a master status, and it just overshadows every single other part of your identity. So how do people actually live with themselves when they break the rules? Well, they use what sociologists call techniques of neutralization, which I just like to call the excuses. These are all the little mental tricks we play to quiet our own guilt. Saying it wasn't my fault, or hey, nobody got hurt. Or maybe you blame the victim. They totally had it coming. Or you appeal to your friends. I did it for them. And of course, there's the classic, come on, everyone else is doing it. But here's the final and maybe most important twist in all this. Deviance isn't always a bad or destructive thing. Sometimes, the very people who are breaking the rules today are actually the ones building the society of tomorrow. This is a fascinating concept called tertiary deviance. This is what happens when a group that's been labeled as deviant decides, you know what, we're going to reclaim that label. We're going to own it and fight to make our behavior seem normal. Just think about tattoos. They used to be considered super deviant in a lot of places, and now they're totally mainstream. Heck, even Crocs went from being a fashion crime to a trendy must-have. That is tertiary deviance right there. And really, this brings us to the main takeaway of this whole explainer. Society sets the rules, people push back against the boundaries, and in response, society slowly changes and adjusts. It's this constant dance, this cycle of order versus rebellion, that makes social life so dynamic and honestly, so interesting. So I'm going to leave you with this one last thought. The next time you see something or someone you think is weird or deviant, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, are you looking at a rule breaker? Or are you maybe just getting a sneak peek at the new normal? Are today's rebels actually creating tomorrow's rules?